The morning started like any other day aboard the human warship Indomitable Spirit. Captain Lee Dong-min was drinking his coffee in his quarters when the alarm bells started ringing. His ship was exploring the far edges of known space when something appeared on their sensors that changed everything. Lieutenant Kim Yoo-jin rushed to the bridge with her tablet in hand. She had been the weapons officer for 3 years but had never seen readings like these. 12 massive alien ships had just dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of them. Each alien vessel was 10 times bigger than their own ship and covered in strange blue lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. The alien ships looked like floating crystals made of metal and glass. They moved through space without making any sound, but their energy signatures were off the charts. Engineer Choi Min-ho ran diagnostics on his systems 3 times because he could not believe what his instruments were telling him. These ships had power cores that could destroy entire planets. Captain Dong-min stood on his bridge and watched the alien fleet arrange itself in attack formation. His crew of 200 men and women had signed up to explore new worlds and make peaceful contact with other species. None of them had expected to find an empire that wanted to enslave them. The alien message came through their communication system in perfect Korean. The voice was cold and mechanical like a computer, but the words were clear. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and they had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Every species they encountered had 2 choices: surrender and become slaves, or resist and be destroyed. Admiral Vex commanded the Council fleet from his flagship called the Eternal Crusher. He had conquered 47 different species during his long career. The humans looked small and weak compared to the warriors he usually fought. Their single ship seemed like a toy next to his massive destroyers. Captain Dong-min looked at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were people who had left Earth to find new homes among the stars. They had families back home who were counting on them to keep exploring and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. The idea of surrendering to aliens who wanted to make them slaves was impossible to accept. He ordered Lieutenant Kim Yoo-jin to charge all weapon systems. The Indomitable Spirit had 6 plasma cannons and a dozen missile tubes. Against 12 alien destroyers, it was like bringing a knife to a gunfight, but Dong-min did not care about the odds. He had never backed down from a fight in his life, and he was not going to start now. The aliens expected the humans to surrender immediately. In 3,000 years of conquest, they had never met a species that chose to fight when facing impossible odds. Most civilizations took one look at the Council fleet and gave up without firing a single shot. The few species that did resist usually ran away after losing their first battle. When the human ship began charging its weapons, Admiral Vex almost laughed. The tiny vessel had less firepower than one of his scout ships. He decided to disable their engines and take the crew prisoner. Living humans would be valuable as curiosities for the slave markets on the Council homeworld. Captain Dong-min did something that shocked every alien in the fleet. Instead of trying to run away or hiding behind asteroids, he ordered a direct attack on the largest enemy ship. The Indomitable Spirit accelerated to full speed and flew straight at the alien flagship like a missile aimed at a target. Lieutenant Kim Yoo-jin opened fire when they reached optimal range. Her plasma cannon shot bolts of superheated energy that struck the alien ship's shields. The shields flickered and sparked but held strong. The aliens had technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything humans had ever built. But the human attack had another effect that no one expected. The alien ships were huge and powerful, but they were also slow. When Captain Dong-min ordered evasive maneuvers, his small ship danced between the enemy vessels like a fighter dodging elephants. The aliens could not turn their massive destroyers fast enough to track the human ship. Engineer Choi Min-ho pushed their engines beyond safe limits. The ship shook and metal groaned under the stress, but they stayed ahead of the alien weapons. Lieutenant Kim Yoo-jin kept firing at weak points in the enemy formation. Her shots were not strong enough to destroy the alien ships, but they caused damage that forced the enemies to slow down and repair their systems. The real shock came when 3 alien boarding pods attached to the human ship. The Council warriors inside were 8 feet tall with natural armor plates covering their bodies. They had claws that could cut through steel, and weapons that fired energy beams hot enough to melt metal. These were the elite troops that had conquered dozens of worlds. Sergeant Park Ji-won was waiting for them in the corridor outside the main airlock. She had 20 Marines armed with standard human weapons and makeshift barricades built from furniture and equipment. When the aliens cut through the airlock door, they expected to find cowering humans begging for mercy. Instead, they found soldiers who refused to give up. Park Ji-won and her Marines fought like cornered wolves. They used every trick they knew, from urban warfare training, booby traps made from spare parts, ambushes in narrow hallways, coordinated attacks that hit the aliens from multiple directions at once. The alien warriors had conquered worlds, but they had never fought anyone like humans. Most species surrendered when they realized they could not win. Humans kept fighting, even when victory was impossible. They used their smaller size to crawl through ventilation shafts and attack from behind. They rigged explosives that damaged their own ship just to hurt the enemy. After 2 hours of brutal fighting, the surviving aliens retreated to their boarding pods. They had never faced resistance like this before. The humans had inferior weapons and no natural armor, but they fought with a fury that terrified the Council warriors. Several aliens were wounded and one was dead. No primitive species had ever killed a Council soldier in hand-to-hand combat. Admiral Vex could not believe what he was seeing. His elite troops were retreating from a handful of humans armed with primitive weapons. The small human ship was still flying and still fighting, despite being outnumbered 12-1. This was not supposed to happen. The news of the battle spread through subspace communication networks across the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, a primitive species had not only resisted the Galactic Council, but had actually won a battle against them. The implications sent shockwaves through every alien civilization in known space. If humans could fight back, maybe others could too. Captain Dong-min broadcast a message to Earth reporting the first contact with hostile aliens. His ship was damaged and low on supplies, but his crew was still alive and still fighting. The indomitable spirit had become a symbol of human determination that would echo across the universe for generations to come. The emergency message from Captain Lee Dong-min reached Earth 3 days after the battle with the alien fleet. President Yoon Soo-jin was in her office reviewing trade agreements when her aide burst through the door with a tablet showing the transmission. The words she read changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. They were not alone among the stars, and the beings they had encountered wanted to enslave them. The Galactic Council had given humanity an ultimatum: surrender and become slaves or face total destruction. Captain Dong-min had chosen to fight, but his single ship could not hold off an entire galactic empire forever. President Yoon called an emergency session of the United Earth government within hours. Representatives from every nation on the planet gathered in the emergency bunker beneath Geneva. The message from the indomitable spirit was broadcast to the entire assembly and then to every human being on Earth. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Some people panicked and demanded that Earth surrender to avoid destruction. Others became angry and called for immediate military action against the aliens. Most humans simply stood in shock as they realized their species was facing extinction at the hands of beings they had never known existed. General Han Woo-sung took control of the military response. He was a career soldier who had spent 30 years preparing for wars between human nations. Now he had to figure out how to fight enemies from another star system with technology thousands of years more advanced than anything Earth possessed. The Yach. Human space fleet consisted of 47 ships designed for exploration and cargo transport. Most of them carried scientific equipment and supplies for establishing new colonies. Only 12 ships had any weapons at all, and those were light defensive systems meant to deal with space pirates or asteroid impacts. Against a galactic empire with millions of warships, humanity seemed completely hopeless. General Han gathered his staff officers and asked them to find solutions to an impossible problem. How could a single planet defend itself against enemies who had conquered entire solar systems? The answer came from Dr. Song Hai-young, who worked at the Advanced Physics Research Center in Seoul. She had been studying alien technology recovered from meteorites that had crashed on Earth over the past century. Most scientists thought these fragments came from natural cosmic events, but Dr. Song suspected they were pieces of alien spacecraft. Her team worked around the clock analyzing the alien materials and comparing them to human technology. They discovered that while alien hardware was far superior to anything humans had built, their software was surprisingly vulnerable. The aliens had evolved their computer systems over thousands of years without ever facing cyber warfare. Technician Nam Yeon Ho made the breakthrough discovery that changed everything. He found that human computer viruses could infect alien systems because the aliens had no defenses against chaotic, unpredictable code. Their programs were elegant and efficient, but they could not handle the random, destructive nature of human malware. Dr. Song immediately contacted General Han with the news. If they could not match alien firepower, they could use human ingenuity to level the playing field. Within hours, teams of programmers across Earth began developing the most sophisticated computer viruses ever created. Captain Baek Seong-gi was put in charge of converting civilian ships into warships. He had been a military engineer before retiring to design cargo vessels for the Mars colonies. Now he had to figure out how to turn exploration ships into weapons that could fight alien destroyers. His teams worked in orbital shipyards around Earth and Mars. They stripped out scientific equipment and passenger quarters to make room for weapons and armor. Every cubic meter of space was dedicated to making these ships as deadly as possible before they were inevitably destroyed in battle. The conversion process was brutal and desperate. Cargo holds became missile storage compartments. Life support. Systems were reduced to minimum levels to save power for weapons. Crew quarters were eliminated entirely because everyone knew these ships were designed for one-way missions. But the most important change was not technological, but psychological. Humanity united in a way that had never happened before in their history. Every nation contributed resources without asking for anything in return. Every person on Earth understood that they were fighting for the survival of their entire species. Factory worker Im So-ra had been making parts for civilian spacecraft before the alien threat was announced. Now she worked 18-hour shifts, building ammunition and armor plating for warships. She slept on the factory floor and ate meals while operating her machines because every minute counted. Farmer Kwon Taemin converted his agricultural fields to produce materials needed for ship construction. His corn and wheat were replaced with plants that could be processed into composite armor and insulation. His livestock were slaughtered to provide protein for workers who needed to stay strong during the long work shifts. Children as young as 12 learned to operate communication equipment and radar systems. Elderly people who had fought in Earth wars decades earlier taught young soldiers the art of guerrilla warfare. Everyone from scientists to janitors had a role to play in preparing for the war that would determine humanity's future. The first wave of human reinforcements launched from Earth 2 weeks after receiving Captain Dongmin's message. 25 converted warships headed for the Outer Rim, where the indomitable Spirit was still fighting alone against the alien fleet. The ships carried crews who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Admiral Park Min-woo commanded the relief fleet from his flagship, the Defiant Dawn. He had been captain of a cargo ship hauling supplies to Jupiter before the crisis began. Now he led the most important military mission in human history, even though he had never commanded warships before. The journey to the Outer Rim took 6 days at maximum speed. During the trip, the crews practiced with their new weapon systems and prepared for battle against enemies they had never seen. Most of the sailors had been civilian workers just weeks earlier. Now they were the only thing standing between humanity and slavery. When the human reinforcements finally reached the battle zone, they found the indomitable Spirit still fighting. Captain Dongmin's ship was heavily damaged and running low on supplies, but his crew had never stopped resisting. The sight of human warships arriving to help gave both sides a clear message. Humanity would not surrender no matter what the odds against them. They would fight until their last breath and beyond. The alien empire had awakened something in humans that had been sleeping since they first looked up at the stars and dreamed of traveling among them. The war for human freedom had truly begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The massive space station called the Eternal Throne floated in the center of the galaxy like a metal moon. Emperor Korth had ruled the Galactic Council from this fortress for over 200 years. He had seen the conquest of dozens of species and the expansion of council territory across thousands of star systems. Nothing had ever threatened the absolute authority of his empire until now. Admiral Vex stood before the Council of Elders in the Great Assembly Hall. His uniform was torn, and his armor showed burn marks from human weapons. The report he carried would shake the foundation of everything the Council believed about their invincible military machine. The human resistance had cost the Council 23 destroyers either damaged or completely destroyed. 4,000 alien soldiers were dead or wounded. An entire invasion fleet had been held at bay by creatures that barely reached their shoulders. The military implications were staggering, but the political consequences were even worse. Chancellor Morg studied the battle reports with growing alarm. He had been the Council's chief strategist for 50 years and had planned the conquest of every major species in their empire. His strategies had never failed before because they were based on one simple principle. Overwhelming force applied quickly would break any resistance before it could spread. The humans had changed everything by refusing to follow the expected pattern. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw a Council fleet. The few that resisted usually gave up after losing their first major battle. No primitive civilization had ever continued fighting when facing impossible odds. Emperor Korth called for an emergency session of the full Council. Representatives from every major alien species in the Empire gathered to discuss this unprecedented crisis. The Reptilian Dominion sent their war chiefs. The Crystalline Collective dispatched their hive minds. Even the mysterious energy beings materialized to participate in the debate. The discussion quickly became heated as different factions argued about how to respond. Some Council members wanted to negotiate with the humans and offer them limited autonomy within the Empire. Others demanded immediate escalation using the most powerful weapons in the Council arsenal, including planet-killing devices. Supreme General Zix had a different perspective on the situation. She commanded the Council's most elite military units and had personally overseen the destruction of 3 rebellious worlds. In her opinion, the human problem required a simple solution: complete annihilation of their entire species as a warning to others. But there was a complication that made every decision more dangerous. Word of the human resistance was spreading across the galaxy through secret communication networks that the Council had never been able to completely control. Subjugated species were talking about the humans who had fought back and won. On the water world of Aquatica, the amphibious Neroids whispered in their underwater cities about the small bipeds who refused to surrender. In the crystal caves of Minerva, the insectoid Krillians passed messages through their hive networks about species that could resist the Council successfully. Intelligence reports flooded into the Eternal Throne from across the Empire. Slave populations were becoming restless and asking questions about human military capabilities. Some groups were secretly stockpiling weapons and supplies. A few had even begun coordinating resistance activities across planetary boundaries. The Thylorian resistance movement had been dormant for 50 years since their last failed uprising. Now their underground leaders were making contact with other oppressed species and sharing tactical information. The mere existence of human resistance had given hope to billions of beings who had accepted their slavery as permanent. Emperor Korth realized that the human conflict was no longer just about conquering one primitive planet. It had become a test of Council authority throughout the entire galaxy. If they failed to crush humanity quickly and completely, their empire might face rebellions on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Chancellor Morg proposed a radical solution that had only been used twice in Council history. Humanity should be classified as a Category 5 hostile species representing an existential threat to galactic stability. This classification would authorize the use of any weapons necessary, including devices that could sterilize entire solar systems. The debate over human classification lasted for 3 days as Council members argued about the precedent such a decision would create. Category 5 status had been reserved for species that possessed technology capable of threatening the entire galaxy. Humans had no such capabilities, but their resistance was having effects far beyond their actual military strength. Admiral Vex was ordered to return to the human conflict zone with reinforcements. His new fleet would consist of 200 heavy cruisers and 50 planetary bombardment ships. The mission parameters were simple: locate Earth and destroy every trace of human civilization, including their colonies and outposts. But the Council made several critical mistakes in their planning. They assumed that human resistance was limited to military units, and that destroying their homeworld would end the conflict immediately. They did not understand that humans had already begun forming alliances with other species who shared their desire for freedom. The secret networks that carried news of human victories also carried technical information about Council weaknesses. Former Council engineers who had been enslaved for generations began sharing blueprints and tactical data with anyone willing to fight. The human conflict was becoming a catalyst for the largest rebellion in galactic history. Emperor Korth received disturbing reports from across his empire. Production on slave worlds was declining as workers engaged in subtle sabotage. Transport ships were experiencing mysterious technical failures that delayed critical supplies. Even some Council military units were reporting equipment problems that seemed suspiciously convenient. The Etherian energy beings who powered many Council ships began requiring more rest periods and producing less energy output. The aquatic Neroids who maintained underwater facilities started reporting structural problems that required extensive repairs. Every enslaved species seemed to be developing sudden competency issues that hurt Council operations. Supreme General Zix realized that they were facing something unprecedented in galactic history. A multi-species uprising coordinated across thousands of light years and involving dozens of different civilizations. The human example had shown every oppressed being in the galaxy that resistance was possible. The Council's response was swift and brutal. They declared martial law across their entire empire and began executing suspected rebels without trial. Military forces were recalled from frontier expansion to deal with internal security threats. The empire that had been growing for 3,000 years suddenly found itself fighting for survival. But the crackdown only made the situation worse. Every execution created martyrs who inspired more resistance. Every planet placed under military occupation became a breeding ground for guerrilla fighters. The Council's absolute authority, which had been maintained through fear and overwhelming force, began to crack under the pressure. Emperor Korth stood in his throne room looking out at the stars and realized that everything was changing. The human conflict had revealed that his empire was not as strong as he had believed. Billions of slaves who had accepted their fate for generations were now dreaming of freedom. The galaxy would never be the same regardless of whether humanity survived or was destroyed. The war was no longer about conquering one small planet. It had become a struggle for the future of galactic civilization itself. The secret message reached Admiral Li Dongmin while his damaged ship was hiding in an asteroid field. The transmission was encrypted using mathematical sequences that no human had ever seen before. When his communications officer finally decoded it, the contents shocked everyone on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit. The message came from someone calling himself Kyle, who claimed to be a former Council engineer. His species, called the Thylorians, had been enslaved 200 years ago. When they refused to surrender their technology to the Empire, now Kale was offering to help humanity in exchange for one simple promise. He wanted humans to remember his people and fight for their freedom too. The message included detailed technical specifications for Council ship designs and weapon systems. It also revealed the locations of secret bases where other rebel species were gathering to plan coordinated resistance operations. Admiral Dongmin had been promoted after the reinforcements from Earth arrived to support his mission. Now he commanded a small fleet of 30 human warships that were trying to stay ahead of the massive Council force hunting them. The alien technical data could give them the edge they needed to survive, but trusting aliens who had been part of the empire that wanted to enslave humanity was difficult. Captain Kim Yoo-jin argued that it might be a trap designed to lure human ships into ambush positions. Engineer Choi Min-ho worried that alien technology might contain hidden programs that could sabotage their systems. The decision became easier when Council forces attacked one of the locations mentioned in Kale's message. Long-range sensors showed alien ships bombarding an asteroid base where several species were meeting. The explosions could be seen from hundreds of kilometers away as the Council tried to eliminate the rebel gathering. Admiral Dongmin ordered his fleet to respond to the distress calls coming from the attacked base. When they arrived, they found a desperate battle in progress. Ships from half a dozen different species were fighting against overwhelming Council forces. Most of the rebel vessels were damaged and running out of ammunition. The human fleet struck the Council ships from behind while they were focused on destroying the rebel base. Lieutenant Commander Park Ji-won led a boarding assault on a Council cruiser, while Captain Baek Seung-gi coordinated missile attacks from multiple directions. The surprise attack saved the rebel base, but barely. After the battle, Admiral Dong-min met face-to-face with alien species he had never seen before. Kale was a tall, thin being with blue skin and 4 arms. His people, the Thylorians, had been scientists and engineers before being enslaved by the Council. Their knowledge of alien technology was invaluable. The aquatic Neroids looked like giant dolphins that could survive in both water and air. They offered to provide underwater bases on ocean worlds where human ships could hide and repair damage. Their leader, Admiral Sela, had been fighting the Council for 30 years using guerrilla tactics. Most impressive were the insectoid Krillians, who looked like giant ants with the ability to think and communicate like humans. They could manufacture weapons and supplies faster than any other species in the galaxy. Their Queen Mother Zia commanded millions of workers who could build entire fleets in weeks. The energy beings called Etherians were the most mysterious members of the Alliance. They appeared as glowing clouds of light that could take solid form when necessary. For centuries they had been forced to power Council ships and weapons. Now they wanted revenge against their former masters. Dr. Song Hae-young worked closely with alien scientists to develop new technologies that combined human innovation with advanced alien knowledge. The Thylorians taught her how to modify plasma weapons to disrupt Council shields. The Neroids shared techniques for underwater construction and camouflage. The most valuable contribution came from the Etherians, who revealed the secret of Council power systems. They showed human engineers how to create weapons that could overload alien energy cores and cause massive explosions. These quantum disruption devices could destroy ships 10 times larger than anything humans could build. But the alliance was not easy to maintain. Many humans still feared that their alien partners might betray them to save themselves. Some aliens believed that humans were too savage and unpredictable to be trusted with advanced technology. Cultural differences caused constant misunderstandings and conflicts. The breakthrough came during a Council attack on a joint base that housed both human and alien refugees. Admiral Dong-min fought alongside Kale's people to defend the installation, while Captain Kim Yoo-jin coordinated evacuation efforts for civilian populations from multiple species. Human soldiers threw themselves between alien families and Council weapons. Thylorian engineers sacrificed their lives to keep human ships flying. Neroid warriors used their bodies to shield human children from energy blasts. The battle created bonds between species that had never existed before. After the attack, survivors from all species worked together to treat the wounded and repair their damaged ships. Humans shared their medical supplies with aliens who had lost everything. Alien technicians used their advanced knowledge to upgrade human weapon systems without asking for anything in return. Mother Zia of the Krillians was impressed by human willingness to die for beings they barely knew. Her species valued logic and efficiency above all else, but she recognized that human emotions made them incredibly powerful allies. Their refusal to abandon friends even in hopeless situations inspired other species to fight harder. Admiral Sela of the Neroids had spent decades fighting alone against the Council Empire. Now she found herself part of a multi-species alliance that could strike at targets across the galaxy simultaneously. The coordination possibilities were endless if they could learn to work together effectively. The rebels began planning something that had never been attempted in galactic history. A coordinated uprising that would strike at Council targets on hundreds of worlds at the same time. Each species would contribute their unique strengths to create an unstoppable wave of resistance. Humans provided the determination and tactical innovation that kept fighting, even when victory seemed impossible. Thylorians contributed advanced technology and detailed knowledge of Council weaknesses. Neroids offered aquatic bases and transportation networks that Council forces could not easily attack. Krillians could manufacture weapons and supplies in quantities that would support massive military operations. Etherians had the power to disable Council ships and facilities by overloading their energy systems. Together they formed an alliance that was greater than the sum of its parts. But the most important thing they shared was hope. For the first time in centuries, enslaved species believed that freedom was possible. The human example had shown that even the most powerful empire could be resisted successfully if enough beings were willing to fight for their liberty. The alliance spread across the galaxy as more species joined the rebellion. Former council colonies declared independence and formed their own governments. Slave populations rose up against their masters. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years found itself fighting for survival against enemies it had created. Emperor Korth received reports of rebellions on over 300 worlds within a single month. His military forces were spread too thin to suppress all the uprisings simultaneously. The human conflict had become a galactic war that threatened everything the Council had built. The unlikely alliance between humans and aliens had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in their desire for freedom. The war was no longer about conquest, but about the right of every intelligent being to determine their own destiny. Fleet Admiral Zix emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system with the largest military force in galactic history. 10,000 Council warships spread across the darkness like a metal constellation. Each vessel carried enough firepower to crack continents, and their combined strength could shatter entire worlds into fragments. The alien commander stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Worldbreaker, watching Earth appear on the main viewing screen. The small blue planet looked peaceful and defenseless from this distance. She found it hard to believe that such an insignificant world had caused so much trouble for the mighty Galactic Council. Admiral Zix had been given absolute authority to end the human problem permanently. Her orders were simple and direct. Destroy every human ship in space, then bombard Earth until nothing remained alive on the surface. The planet would become a lifeless rock that served as a warning to other species about the price of resistance. The human defense fleet that moved to intercept her armada was pitifully small. Admiral Li Dongmin commanded fewer than 300 ships, most of which had been converted from civilian vessels. Against 10,000 Council warships, the odds were impossible, but the humans showed no sign of backing down from the fight. President Yoon Soo-jin broadcast humanity's final response to the Council ultimatum from the emergency bunker beneath Seoul. Behind her, the city showed signs of damage from long-range bombardment that had already begun. Explosions lit the sky as orbital defense platforms tried to stop incoming missiles. Her words were transmitted across all frequencies so that every human in the solar system could hear them. She stood among the ruins of her office with her head held high and her voice steady despite the destruction around her. The message was brief, but it captured everything humanity believed about freedom and dignity. "We will not kneel," she said, looking directly into the camera. "We will not surrender our children to slavery. We will not abandon our dreams of exploring the stars as free beings. We will fight until our last breath and beyond, because some things are more important than survival itself." The battle began in the outer reaches of the solar system near the orbit of Pluto. Human ships struck like wolves attacking a herd of elephants. They targeted isolated Council vessels and disappeared into asteroid fields before reinforcements could arrive. Every attack was designed to inflict maximum damage while avoiding direct confrontation. Captain Kim Yoo-jin commanded the destroyer New Seoul in the vanguard of the human fleet. Her ship had been a cargo hauler 6 months earlier, but now it bristled with weapons and armor plating. She led her squadron in hit-and-run attacks that crippled Council supply lines and forced them to divert ships for escort duty. Engineer Choi Min-ho had developed new tactics that used the solar system itself as a weapon. Human ships would hide behind asteroids and use gravitational slings to accelerate chunks of rock and metal toward Council formations. The improvised projectiles were not sophisticated, but they were effective against ships that were not expecting such crude attacks. The Council fleet had overwhelming firepower, but they struggled to deal with human unpredictability. Their battle plans assumed that enemies would fight in organized formations using standard tactics. Humans ignored all military doctrine and attacked from directions that seemed suicidal to rational commanders. But the sheer number of Council Ships made human victory impossible. For every alien vessel destroyed, 10 more took its place. Human losses mounted steadily as brave crews sacrificed themselves to buy time for Earth's final preparations. The heroes of humanity died alone in the cold darkness of space. Captain Baekshung-gi led his entire squadron in a desperate assault on a council battle group near Jupiter. His 12 ships were outnumbered 50-1, but they managed to destroy a major command vessel before being overwhelmed. The last transmission from his flagship was a message telling Earth that they had fought with honor. Admiral Park Min-woo commanded the orbital defense platforms around Earth when the Council fleet finally reached the inner solar system. His weapons were designed to stop asteroids and space debris, not military warships with advanced shielding. The platforms held out for 6 hours before being systematically destroyed. As Council forces closed in on Earth itself, humanity played its final desperate gamble. Dr. Song Hae-young activated a network of hidden transmitters that had been built across every continent. The devices had been disguised as communication relays, but their real purpose was far more ambitious. The transmitters broadcast something unprecedented across the galaxy. They told the complete story of humanity's fight for freedom in the languages of every known species. The signal was so powerful that it reached the farthest corners of Council space and could not be jammed or blocked by alien technology. The transmission showed human families saying goodbye as fathers and mothers left for battles they would never return from. It revealed Council atrocities that had been hidden for millennia, including the destruction of entire species that had refused to surrender. Most importantly, it demonstrated that victory against tyranny was possible. The message included technical specifications for the weapons and tactics humans had developed. It showed other species how to build quantum disruptors that could overload Council energy systems. It revealed the locations of secret bases where rebels could gather and coordinate their resistance efforts. Admiral Zix watched the human transmission with growing alarm. Her communications officers reported that the signal was being received on hundreds of Council worlds and was triggering immediate rebellions. Entire star systems were declaring independence and attacking Council installations. The battle for Earth became secondary to the larger crisis engulfing the Galactic Empire. Council forces across the galaxy were reporting simultaneous uprisings that stretched their military resources to the breaking point. The human transmission had lit a fire that was spreading faster than it could be contained. But Admiral Zix was determined to complete her mission, regardless of what happened elsewhere. She ordered the bombardment of Earth to begin, even as reports came in of rebellions on the Council homeworld itself. The planet that had started this galactic revolution would pay the ultimate price. Human ships made desperate attempts to intercept the bombardment fleet. Admiral Dong-min loaded the heavily damaged Indomitable Spirit with every explosive device his crew could gather. He aimed his ship directly at Admiral Zix's flagship in a ramming attack that would destroy both vessels. The collision tore both ships apart in a ball of fire that could be seen from Earth's surface. Admiral Dong-min and Admiral Zix died together in an explosion that symbolized the mutual destruction that war brings to all participants. But the sacrifice gave the remaining human fleet the opening they needed. Captain Kim Yoo-jin took command of the surviving human ships and launched a coordinated attack on the Council fleet's command structure. Using intelligence provided by their alien allies, they targeted the ships that coordinated the massive armada. Without central command, the Council formation began to fragment. Some alien captains continued fighting with determination to complete their mission. Others began retreating towards safe ports where they could wait for new orders. A few even switched sides and joined the rebellion that was spreading across the galaxy. The disciplined Council fleet dissolved into chaos. The bombardment of Earth continued, but at reduced intensity as fewer ships participated. Cities burned and millions died, but humanity survived as a species. More importantly, their example had inspired a galactic revolution that would topple the empire that had oppressed countless worlds. The battle for Earth was ending, but the war for galactic freedom had only begun. In the ruins of human cities and the debris fields around other planets, the seeds of a new civilization were taking root. The galaxy would never be the same again. The human transmission triggered something the Council had never faced: simultaneous rebellions across hundreds of worlds. Species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up together, inspired by humanity's example. The Council's vast empire, built on fear and overwhelming force, began to collapse from within. On Earth, the final battle raged around the planet itself. Council forces had broken through the human defenses, but at tremendous cost. Admiral Zix had lost half his fleet to desperate human attacks. His remaining ships began bombarding Earth's cities, determined to destroy humanity even if it meant raising their own prize. Admiral Dongmin made a decision that would echo through history. Loading the indomitable spirit with every explosive device his crew could gather, he aimed his ship directly at the Council flagship. The ramming attack destroyed both vessels, but Dongmin's sacrifice gave the remaining human fleet the opening they needed to strike at the alien command structure. With their leadership crippled, the Council fleet began to fragment. Some alien captains continued fighting, but others started retreating. A few even switched sides, joining the growing rebellion that was spreading across the galaxy. The battle for Earth became the symbol of a much larger war. The aftermath changed everything. The Galactic Council's absolute authority was broken forever. Former slave species established their own governments, forming new alliances based on cooperation rather than conquest. Humanity became the unofficial leaders of this new galactic community, not through force, but through their example of courage and sacrifice. Captain Kim Yu-jin, now Fleet Admiral of the Human Defense Force, established the first truly democratic interstellar government. Dr. Song Hai-young shared human technology freely with all species, believing that knowledge should unite rather than divide civilizations. The human colonies that had been attacked became memorials and meeting places where different species learned to work together. The story of the human warship that refused to surrender became legend. Children of a dozen different species learned about Admiral Dongmin and his crew, about humanity's refusal to accept defeat, and about the power of standing up for what is right. The aftermath of that first contact continued to echo through the universe, inspiring new generations to choose freedom over security, cooperation over domination. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't winning the war. It was showing the galaxy that a different way was possible, where strength came not from conquering others but from standing together against tyranny. The universe would never be the same.